All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Junto. I'm Noah Sawyer, and this is episode 48. And it has been quite a while since I've done an episode. When I first started the show, I was doing them like 4 times a week for a while. And now I'm just in this phase where I've needed to take a break because so much is happening in my personal life, really in my spiritual life. And I look forward to being able to get back in a rhythm where I'm streaming again, but I'm not sure if that's going to be this next week or the week after or who knows. But I feel I feel called to stream today, basically. So I'll do a show for a little while and kind of fill you in on what's been going on in my life through the lens of the subject of today's show. So I called today's show Be Open because I'm thinking, I'll just get into it. So today at church, it's a Friday, so it's a daily mass. Most people, I converted to Catholicism on Easter, if you haven't been privy to that. So that is a major thing that's been going on in my life because it has stirred very deep spiritual changes that I never could have imagined the intensity of prior to my confirmation. And so now I've been going to Mass a lot. I go almost every day because of the sacrament of the Eucharist, which I'm not going to go into a whole bunch of Catholic stuff in this show, but just for context, that is theologically where I have been coming from lately in my actions, and that is a theology I've been exploring in increasing depth, both intellectually and in practice in my prayer life and in my life of action in the world. So today I was at a Mass on Friday, and if you're not familiar with the state of Catholicism in the United States, most people go to Mass on Sunday. There's an obligation if you are a Catholic to go. You have to go on Sunday or Saturday night, which counts as a Sunday. And so there will be a lot of different types of people at some churches on Sunday, but the daily Mass, it is, there's technically variety, but it's like old lady activities for sure. There's lots of old ladies, and that is great, but that is typically what it is. So today I was there, and I ran into my dad first of all in the parking lot, so that was nice. So we went together. But then I saw, there was one other young man there basically, and he was sitting in a pew behind me off to the side, not in handshake distance even or anything. So anyway, so we go through the Mass, and after the Mass, there was a period of adoration today, and that's something at a lot of churches after certain Masses, this was the first Friday of the month, they did a period of adoration where they bring the Eucharist out, the sacrament of the Eucharist out in a monstrance, which is this metal thing that resembles the sun. It's like a case that displays the sacrament to people so you can pray in the presence of that. And so that was happening. So my dad departed, and I stayed for a while to think and pray and read and meditate and just be present. And then I was ready to go. And so I know there's this younger guy over there, and we must be conspicuous to each other on some level, but I've never met him. I have no idea what his personality is, and I feel this draw to introduce myself to him as I feel in many circumstances when I'm around people. I like meeting people and I'm interested in meeting people, but here we are, and we're two men around the same age, late 20s, early 30s, and it's a situation where I'm like, well, maybe he's going through similar things to what I'm going through, and that's why he's here. And so basically I'm in this point where I need to make a decision. It's like I could just leave, or I could say hi. And there's a lot of people in there. It is a quiet environment. But it's more or less acceptable to like say hi and chat and then depart. And so I think this is an experience that I assume most people can relate to, because I almost don't even want to call it anxiety, but it's a type of, it's like a social anxiety thing where you're like, I want to talk to that person, but our culture is such that it's not super natural to be talking to strangers, to be reaching out to people just because you feel like you might have an affinity with them. And that was something, like 10 years ago in college I used to think about, because like I feel like I was seeing the dawn of a worsening state of things, because at the point where I started college, it was pretty normal to like, you see someone who looks interesting, you go up and you say hi and you just talk to them. But then more towards the end, it felt like that type of atomization had stepped up a few degrees, where it was like, oh, well, that person looks cool, but I should stay in my lane and just go do whatever I'm doing. And now, post-COVID, atomization is at an all-time high. And so it's really easy to not introduce yourself to strangers, or, it's very easy to stay in your own lane, basically. And, you meet the people you meet people at work, you meet people through friends of friends, but you don't just go out on a limb and be like, that guy looks interesting or that girl looks interesting, and introduce yourself, because who knows why. So that's something that I'm experiencing at this point, where I'm like, well, I'm kind of ready to go. And part of me is like, I wish he would just leave, or he would just say hi. But really, part of me is like, oh, I wish he would just leave, because he'd make the decision for me. But he stays, and he doesn't appear to be making moves to leave. And I'm like, okay, I have to decide whether to say hi or not. And so this is something I have been encountering in a bunch of varieties of situations in my life lately, where my conscience is where there's an inner conflict, and I don't know what side is coming from where. So it's like my conscience is weighing in on this somewhere, and my desires are weighing in on this somewhere. But when we experience influences on our will, or something pushing us this way or that, like talk to him or don't, we don't really know where those things are coming from in our psyche. It's just too complex. We're only conscious of such a small portion of what's going on in our mind. And so it can be hard to, like, I've always been someone, or at least in like my whole adult life and like later adolescent life in high school and stuff, like I really wanted to do the right thing. Like I kind of always felt like there was a proper way to live. There was a proper way to treat people, and I wanted to find out what it was, and I wanted to know what it was in certain circumstances, like how to behave in whatever circumstance I was in my life, such that the best outcome might come out of it. And when I got into Taoism, that resembled to me this idea of like walking with the Tao. It's like, well, how do I become so sensitive to the forces of the universe that I can do without doing, and the best possible circumstances flow out of that? So I guess I have a history of a little bit of decision paralysis with respect to those things, because I didn't have the key to discovering what the best thing for me to do would be in certain circumstances. And I'm not saying that there's like one set path in every little, situation. But I think there's a spectrum of things you could do. There's certainly really contrary types of actions you could do. I mean, you could ignore someone, you could insult someone, you could be kind to someone, you could lie to someone, you could act crazy in front of someone. There's so many things you can do. But each of those contains the spectrum of actual actions. So I'm not so obsessive about it to think like, oh, I have to like put my pen on this side of the clipboard or the world's going to end or something. Like, I think that is where certain compulsive OCD type behaviors stem from. Maybe like a similar part of our neuropsychology or something. Anyway, so to make a long story just so long, or a short story long, it's like I'm just there trying to decide what to do. And this has, I kind of don't want to tell the primary story about, well, here, I guess I can use this as an example here, because I had an experience that was so extremely intense that relates to this, but it also feels somewhat private. And it's not like personal private, but it feels like, I don't know if I want to like, it feels like, yeah, I almost like it would be vainglory or bragging to bring it up. Not that I didn't do anything heroic, but it just was like, it was like a private thing that really demonstrates this very well. But I think, at least not today. I think I would also cry if I talked about it. But it's just to say that we, in all these circumstances that we wind up in, there really are things we can do that are going to change us and also change the world and change our circumstances dramatically. And I think this stems from the fact that, I mean, I believe in a benevolent creator. I believe in a God that loves us. And downstream from that is the idea, which it's hard to wrap our heads around, or it's hard to wrap our will around so that we actually start behaving in this way. But if we have a benevolent creator who loves us in a way that we can barely fathom, then in all the circumstances that we are in, we have everything we need to take steps on the path to ultimate love and to ultimate healing. We can always find our way out of whatever mire we are trapped in. And if we are open to the circumstances that are around us, and if we look at them, and if we don't just write them off or assume things about what might happen, we can walk down this path and find ourselves in a much better place than we've ever been in our lives. And so, to go back to sitting in the pew beside, like, close to this guy, I'm inclined to just walk out because it just feels easier. It's just like, well, I don't have to worry about anything. But I'm getting into this space now where when I feel this decision paralysis or this complexity, I get a little more sober about it, and I think, well, look, like, what's the worst thing that could happen? I mean, he could be really rude to me. He could insult me. He could make me feel bad or trigger me in some way. I mean, he could kill me. He could attack me, whatever. I mean, I think that's out of the question. But being rude or being like, or just being totally stone-faced, being really confusing, perhaps. I mean, you have no idea who you're going to talk to. He might not be able to talk. I don't even know. You don't know what someone else is going through. And so it could be perplexing. It could be uncomfortable. Basically, that's the thing. And the irony is that I'm thinking like, oh, this could be an uncomfortable situation. Let me just go to my car and I'll go do the other things I was going to do today. That'll be better for me. That'll be better for my plans. I'll, get some work done and I'll be more comfortable. That'll bring me closer to God. That'll bring me closer to who I'm trying to be. However, the irony is that I actually have to do the uncomfortable thing. That's not a rule. It's not like do the most uncomfortable thing available to you at any moment. That would not get you anywhere good. I don't think that would get you very far. But when you are in these kind of like moments, especially social moments or moments related to social decisions and social activities, it's like, don't write it off based on assumptions about what might happen or fears of discomfort or things like that. And instead, what I've been doing is trying to ground it in the Word of God as a Catholic. So and even if that's not your perspective, if you think there's benevolence in the world or that love is the most important thing in the universe, then just ground it in this concept of kindness. Like, we live in a society that is really atomized. People are not nice to each other. People are not nice to strangers. And sometimes just saying hi, introducing yourself, saying like, just wanted to say hi, we're around the same age. And maybe that's it. Maybe he's like, okay. And you just leave. Maybe you have a positive effect on him. Maybe you don't. But that type of action I think of that as a type of psychological almsgiving in a world where we are in psychological, well, I think we're in like a psychological slave camp, but we're in some sort of psychological torment that people don't even know how to process because we're so traumatized. But but that's just my perspective. And however, I think most people would agree that we live in a low trust, uncomfortable, and atomized society where people are not very kind to each other, and people have a dwindling number of friends and are increasingly addicted to media, primarily cell phones and TVs. So, and people are addicted to drugs as well, straight up. I think of the phone as kind of a drug, but straight up pharmaceuticals. So, anyway, yeah, so I'm letting myself be guided by like, well, okay, I'm kind of stuck on what to do. So, what's the most kind thing to do? What's the most, like, don't let me be me. Actually, I can find the sentence that kicked off this realization. I think I have it. I think I have this book right here. And check out my really messed up backpack. That is there's holes, so like even when you zip up some of the pockets, it's open. Which I guess is the theme of the show. My backpack is being open just all the time, whether I want it to be or not. So, all right. So I had this little book. It's kind of old lady vibes, TBH, but it's meditations for Eucharistic adoration, and it is good, but it is also, I mean, in Catholic literature, there is a, it's a universal religion, so it has to appeal to everyone, including like old lady Americans, and that kind of feels like the territory I'm in here. So I opened up to a random page, and I just this was the page I opened up to, and I was like, all right, I opened up to this one, so I'll read this one. And that kind of relates to how I'm viewing the way that the universe is constructed lately. So, and it starts with a Bible quote that I like a lot, which is, "No one has greater love than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends." John 15:13. I am a very friend-oriented person, and I like my friends, so that one always speaks to me. So I'm kind of like putting off, like I'm basically reading this book being like, okay, like, well, I'm not literally thinking this, but I am partially, like, the anxious part of me is like, all right, well, I'm gonna sit here and read. Maybe that guy will leave. He'll make the decision for me, and then I won't even have to decide. But let me just read this here. So it's talking about how God loves us, and God is present in this sacrament. So this is in periods of Eucharistic adoration. It's like you're in the presence of God. In a sense, we're always in the presence of God. God is always in us. But there's a historical entrance of God into material reality that happens via the sacraments. So there's something special about being in a room for Eucharistic adoration because of that, because you're in this, in this section of space-time in which there is this particular connection with the divine that does not happen everywhere or at all times. So that's my understanding of it anyway. So there's, it's talking about like, God, you love me, you lay down your life for me as a friend, and like, and what do you ask in return? That I love you back? Can you tell that I do love you, or do I leave room for doubt? Can I always say without reservation that what I do for you? So that sentence struck me. Actually, what really struck me was the use of the word doubt, because the homily today was about doubt, and I won't get into that for just to save time, but I hope I didn't lose my notebook again. I've lost some notebooks recently, and now I'm like, do I have my homily notes from today, or are they just gone forever? We'll find out tomorrow. But yeah, that sentence. Can I always say without reservation that what I do for you? So here I am in a room with the material historical presence of divinity, and I also was just in communion with God through partaking in the Eucharist. So, and this question is posed to me through this book, which is, can I always say without reservation that what I do for you, that what I do for God? Because there's this conformity to really do what is best for us and best for the world. I've discovered through Catholicism is to like, we were given our lives out of love by God, and our highest expression of love is to give our lives back to God through love of him and of our fellow man. So that is really what the whole tradition and interpretation of the Bible in the Catholic tradition demonstrate to us. So there's a lot of little rules in there, or there's a lot of little there's teachings. It is a we have it for a reason, because while it might be written in our hearts and on our conscience that we're able to move forward no matter what, it helps a lot to actually have access to this teaching and to the sacraments. So, for example, things like, what you do for the least among you, you do for me, Christ says. So that tells you pretty clearly that if you want to be doing things for God, you need to be seeing God in the homeless around you and in the people around you. And you need to act accordingly. So that, I'm sitting here and I'm like, should I talk to him or should I not talk to him? And then I read this sentence, can I always say that without reservation that what I do for God? And I'm like, all right, well, that totally makes up my mind. I don't need to make up my mind. It's been made up, because now I'm like, well, obviously God would want me to be kind to this person. I have no idea what this person's going through. He looks fine. He's not sobbing or anything. But you just never know what's going on with anyone. And sometimes it just feels good to just like say hi, get a handshake, be like, be on your way. And yeah. And that, so I pack up my stuff and I like scoot over in the pew and like lean back to introduce myself and like interrupt. Well, the other thing about introducing yourself to people in church is sometimes they're like praying or their eyes are closed. So you also don't want to like, bother someone, I guess. But I've made up my mind, because I'm like, okay, God, I can either pretend I never saw this person and maybe I run into him next time. Maybe I see him outside in the parking lot, or I can actually use my capacity to act and my capacity to weigh moral decisions and to be kind to another person who's in this space with me. And so I go over, and this is just so unbelievable, basically. So I like go over and I'm like, hey, my name's Noah, like just wanted to introduce myself because we're like the only young people here. And he immediately is just like, I'm changing my friend's name here, but he's like, are you Matthew's friend? And I'm just like, what the fuck? Like, this is just such a like crazy coincidence, because pardon my language, but I am just like, bro, like I was just sitting over there debating whether or not to talk to this guy. And like, ultimately I arrive at this decision by means of this book and considering obedience to what God has taught us about treating other people. And I go over, and immediately this is like a huge, in a way, like I'm inclined to say like treasure trove to my life in a way, because it's like, oh, and I don't know that yet, but I am just like shocked. I'm just like, bro, like what? Like, this is really, like, how could it be any more obvious that is a good way for me to be making decisions, basically, is kind of how I'm processing this in the moment. And it's like, yeah, I'm that guy. And he says his name, and I'm like, oh, wow. Like, he told me about you, and he was telling me that we should meet each other. And he only just met this guy, Matthew, and I only just met this guy, Matthew, as well. And so we're like, you want to go talk outside? So I'll elaborate on that in a minute, but we wound up talking for 5 hours straight outside in like 90 plus degree weather, but in the shade. But the thing that I really want to use to tie all of this together is, and maybe I don't really have to say all that much more about this guy that I met, because it's implied in that we talked for 5 hours that we had a lot in common. We had a lot to talk about. And I think it was meant to be that we met each other. So anyway, but the real thing that ties all of this together is that, I don't know, 3 or 4 weeks ago, I was in the same church. I was in almost the same pew, and there was a young man sitting in almost the exact same position that this other guy was sitting in, like one pew back and a little bit further to the right, like out of handshake distance. And I mention that because there is a point in the Mass where, like, you, like, either wave to people or shake their hand if they're close, and you say, peace be with you, and you offer, you spread peace amongst each other, and you interact in that way. So if we were closer, like, maybe we would have even introduced ourselves during the Mass. However, it didn't happen. So I bring this up because so yeah, like a month or so before, I was in the same position, and there was a guy in the same other position, and I had this exact same dilemma where I'm like, and I look over and I'm like, well, maybe he doesn't look like I don't know, you make all these excuses where you're like, well, he probably just doesn't want to talk to me. He doesn't look like he want to talk to me, or, you just make all these excuses. And I don't remember what pushed me over the line in that moment, but I was just like, look, I gotta say hi to this guy. Like, I never see anyone remotely my age here. So I introduced myself to him, and that was Matthew. So that was the guy who, through more and more sequences of coincidences, like, told me and this person who I met today about each other, and was like, you guys have similar, like, intellectual interests with respect to Catholicism and the world, and, like, you guys should probably meet. And he said it pretty subtly to me, but he was just like, you guys, I think you guys should meet. Like, I think you should meet this guy and the other thing is, they also just met coincidentally at this church one time. So anyway, maybe that doesn't seem so crazy, but but for actually, there's, like, a lot more to this story that does make it just, like, unbelievable. Because, like, when I met Matthew, he was like, what are you doing tonight? My cousin started this Bible study. And I'm like, well, I was actually going to this other Bible study, but, like, I'll go to yours and check it out, because it was people, like, under 35. So, whereas the Bible study I was going to was like people over 35, basically. And so, I was intrigued, and me and a friend went, and after that, he gave me a card that he found, like a flyer, basically, about a discernment retreat. And he's like, I think I'm going to go to this. Like, you should go too. I grabbed 2 of these, like, you should think about it and go. And I'm like, yeah, like, maybe. But again, like, basically, I have this inclination maybe to say no to things. I mean, I know I definitely had that as a kid, and I've had that at various points in my life, despite being, like, in a certain way kind of outgoing. And there's anyway, so, I basically, the point of this is, over the past month especially, like, I've had so many situations where I'm like, maybe, like, okay, there's an opportunity, but I don't know if I'm going to take it. And a lot of it's been related to religion. And so ultimately I did go on that retreat, and that retreat was specifically related to discernment for young men. It was like 18 to 45 or something. And so discernment in Catholicism typically refers to, or most explicitly will refer to, like, discerning whether you're called to be a priest or a monk or a nun or start a family or be single or whatever it is, as well as, discerning other things about what you're called to do in this life, because no matter what your vocation is, like one of those things, you also have a lot of other things that you're called to do in this life. So and I really put off deciding whether or not to go to that retreat. Like, it was not till the day of, and I got really lucky because I'm kind of a procrastinator. So there is, like, not a lot of people would have been receptive to me emailing the night before and being like, hey, can I, like, talk to you before the retreat just to see if I, like, actually want to go on this? And basically that retreat was a very intensely positive and transformative experience. And me and that guy Matthew were there. And I think it was on the retreat, perhaps, that he first mentioned the name and identity of the guy who I met today at church and had this huge conversation with about things related to this show. Like, it was a very, very Junto type conversation. So, yeah, and just to add to this, someone says in the chat, wow, really cosmically serendipitous that I saw this on my feed while rotting on YouTube and struggling with mental health more acutely recently. Haven't listened in a while. And that's great. Yeah, it's great that I'm glad that now I'm thinking about you, because as someone who I've met also by chance randomly on the street one time when I was selling books. So there's basically, let's wrap it up to the title here, because the whole reason I'm even talking about this, one of the last things someone said to me on that retreat was, I was talking to a priest in his 80s, and he was just kind of around. He did mass during the retreat. It's not like he was a major part of it or directing it, but he's someone I'd met a few times. And he, like, to summarize it all, like, I'm about to, like, walk back to my car. He's walking his dog, and, like, he just is like, just be open and just listen. And, like, and that was it. Like, he just, with a very peaceful expression on his face, just was like, just be open. And that summarized the whole retreat, because the whole discernment retreat, like, no one was pushing anything. It was really just like, they knew if we were there, we were having these deep internal experiences of transformation and of calling, and they were just giving us so much food for thought, and we were rapidly metabolizing it spiritually. And it was a very intensely positive thing, and we all got really, we didn't get really close, but we got as close as, some people can get in a few days, and I'm going to keep in contact with them. So, yeah. Yeah, I don't know. So yeah, just to wrap this around to the title, it really is like, through certain particularly intense experiences, but also through all these much more minor experiences, I am seeing the presence of God in just everything around me. And it's not, unfortunately, that's not a 24/7 thing. I think our world tries to obscure God from us and goodness from us as much as possible. It does this through addiction to phones, but it does this through speed of activity. It does this through the economic reliance and certain things that we have to do in order to purchase our food for survival and housing for survival. And even through, like, modeling what human relationships ought to be through media. So we've had television for like almost 100 years. So maybe even 100. I don't know if it was in the 20s that they put it together, but there's this world that is really ripping us apart from the true world. There's this cultural world that is pulling us away from the cosmos, that is pulling us away from the truest reality, the deepest world. And once we start actually living with total trust in the rules of this cosmos as God has given them to us, there's such a really, like, kind of a psychedelic depth to which you start to see goodness operating in the world and evil operating in the world as well, unfortunately. But it's something that can really transform oneself and also one's relationships. And I just think we are pretty conditioned by our cultural historical situation to not be open and to be presumptuous and to assume and to generalize and to abstract instead of concretize what is happening in a situation. We should, because I can be like, to take the situation from earlier today, I'm sitting there, I could be like, oh, well, that guy looks like this other guy I know, like, or that guy looks like he's this type of way. I'm not going to say hi, like, he's not going to want to talk to me. However, that is abstracting what ought to be a concrete reality. You can realize, no, this is a singular person who I don't know. And singular people have so much complexity to them and nuance to them. And, you know, just because he, like, whatever it might be, looks a certain way, I'm not going to assume that he's similar to this other person who looks a similar way or something. But that's our whole world. Our whole world is like, I mean, people do it to themselves. This is what identity is. This is what identity has become. This is what the commodification of identity is in our society. And that's like what identity politics operates on a lot of the time. And there is this, you know, accumulation of labels that we create for ourselves so that we might project them out to the world and be understood in a way that we want other people to understand us. We want to function through our labels so other people can interpret us through what we think they're going to interpret our labels to be, based on how we dress or act or self-identify in language, or, you know, what you put in your Twitter bio or your whatever. So, yeah. But the true reality of love between people is that you are who you are, and it cannot be reduced to anything. It can only be understood in fullness. And that's not to say everyone's going to fully understand each other, but there needs to be this understanding that other people are complex, no matter how similar or even how brainwashed in our current society, like, people are to behave exactly as a certain archetype. Like, people have taken the identity thing and have made it, they've reified it. They've made it real. They've made identity commodification into a person, and that person is all over the place. But everyone can come out of that, because really the reality underneath it is much more complex. There is a lot more going on underneath everybody, even the most identity coded person you can imagine, archetypal, like, contemporary person you can imagine. There's a real person under there, and that person can be met, and that person can be loved, and that person can be freed from the chains of commodified language and abstraction. So anyway, I'm going to call it there. But long story short, just like, first of all, I think everyone should try to figure out if they believe in God or not, like a creator of the universe, a creator of them, a creator of chemistry and molecules and of, language, neurophysiology, if that came from somewhere. And also, I think people afterwards need to reckon with, is there a benevolent creator? Are we created by something that cares about us? Is this world set up in a way where, where love matters, where good things matter? Or is it all the same, or is it evil? And I'll just leave you with this note, because I believe there is a benevolent creator of all of this. When you develop a relationship with that creator, because, a being that was able to create all of this is a being that's going to know what I'm doing at any moment. And I don't mean that in a surveillance-y way. I just mean that in a way where it's like, I can talk to him. And I use him not to anthropomorphize, but just for ease of use. It's like, if there is a God that cares out there, then he knows what I'm saying when I cry out to him, or when I talk to him, or when I complain to him, or when I ask him for help. And just regardless of that concept of prayer, of communicating and developing that relationship, well, I bring it up because when you start doing that, when you start entering into that relationship, it helps you to see that really we have everything that we need available to us in order to progress, to reunify with that God, and which is to say with total love, total and eternal love. So there's I entered into Catholicism because it intellectually made sense, but also because the prayer experiences were profound. So there's this intellectual and experiential I'm trying to think of the word for like the DNA shape, but there's this connection between those two things that occurred that showed me changes in myself and in the world. And it's just to say, like, there is so much for you to be open to that is really going to help you and help the people that you care about in this world. And certainly if you're like a politically oriented person, you think the world is fucked right now and you would like to see something different, there's no way out that does not start with reliance on God and reliance on learning to listen to God as he speaks to us in all of creation, as we experience creation in every situation that we pass through in our lives. So we have to be open to doing the right things in whatever situation we're in, whether we're uncomfortable. We need to start living love, and through that sort of transformation, that's the only foundation of a politics that's going to lead anywhere positive. So anyway, have a good night, everybody, and I hope I do a show soon. Well, part of it is like I increasingly am feeling like this is another one of those things. I can decide whether to do the show or not, and I'm increasingly learning that sharing these experiences are more important than I want to even admit that they are. Like, I feel kind of driven to, even though I don't really feel prepared or feel organized, like I think I'm supposed to be talking to you, basically. So have a good night, have a good weekend, happy 4th of July. I've got George over here. Oh yeah, and just a random note, I changed my setup in here. I don't think, like, most people seem to not know this when I talk to them, but at the old studio, I was always standing, and I'm standing right now. But once I moved here, I tried out sitting, and the vibe was just bad. It was too melancholic. But when I'm up here, it's better. So that's why I had to put George there instead of on the wall, because the whole shot is different, which maybe you noticed. But yeah, I got to figure out a few things with lighting. Like, I don't know what's, I don't want this glare on there, but let me know if you think it looks good. I hope it looks good. I didn't actually really check. I probably should have checked. So anyway, have a happy 4th of July. Read George Washington's farewell address every day, and good night. See you.